Welcome back to Racing Rundown. On today's video, we are going to be kicking off our coverage for the 2022 Belmont Stakes. We will have our full in-depth preview of the race going through every single horse tomorrow. But on today's video, we are going to be joined by our friend Jay Privman. The first time that we've actually been able to get him back on Racing Rundown this year. And I mentioned that last week that due to my inability to schedule things, it's taken this long. But very happy to be able to have you join us once again on Racing Rundown, Jay.
Thanks, Jack. It's good to be back on.
So we'll get into this race now, and obviously we'll get to the horses exiting the Kentucky Derby. But the morning line favorite for this race is We the People, and I was a little bit surprised that he was installed the favorite. So I'll ask you the same question: were you a little bit surprised that he was the favorite or installed as the morning line favorite? His win in the Peter Pan was obviously very impressive, but you had the two horses exiting the Kentucky Derby that looked really well coming out of it.
Yeah, I was not surprised. I happen to have a great amount of respect for David Aragona. I think he's an outstanding morning line maker, and I think he's got a real good feel for how the betting's going to go in this race because of the 8 horses entered. You've got 7 horses who come from either moderately off the pace or well off the pace, and one stone cold front runner, and that's We the People, who, even though the Peter Pan was kind of a made-to-order race for him, where he set the pace over a speed-favoring track, an off-track at that. He took advantage of it, and I can envision a situation where that could happen again Saturday. But irrespective of that, he got a strong buyer speed figure. He is the only speed in the race, and I think he will end up being the favorite when all is said and done. So I think he has the right favorite.
And so getting into his actual ability, and I agree with you. I don't see anyone else that is going to be able to run with him up on the front. And speed has been a weapon in the Belmont Stakes, and it obviously the winner, the more forwardly placed you are in the race, the better you tend to place. The front runner Hot Rod Charlie last year ended up running second there. So given that he is the only speed in the race, would you be looking at the race as of now? Would you be concerned that he could potentially steal this thing and potentially go all the way?
Very much so, because he's the only speed in the race, and some other horse or horses are probably going to have to get out of their comfort zone earlier than they normally would in order to put pressure on him to give them their better chance of potentially winning the race under the circumstances that it looks like the race will be run on Saturday. And it's always easier, I think, to do what you normally do as opposed to do something that you don't normally do. And We the People is going to get to do what he normally does. Everybody else in the race is going to have to potentially adjust to some extent. And that, to me, gives him an advantage. And don't forget, he just won over the track where the race is being run. And that's something that most of the horses in the race haven't done. And, certainly Rich Strike has never even raced at Belmont Park. So those are among the factors that I think give We the People a little bit of an edge going in. But, he's never run against horses of the quality of the field that Rich Strike just beat, or that Mo Donegal beat, even going back to the Remsen when he beat Zandon, and also his win over early voting in the Wood.
And now we'll get to Mo Donegal, who is one of the other horses that has a win over the surface at Belmont Park, and he has shown in his races to have a really good closing kick. He ran by early voting in the Wood Memorial very, very impressively. He was wide in the Kentucky Derby. I thought he ran a very credible 5th place given how much ground he was making up, and there was a little bit of slight contact with him in Barber Road down the stretch, but I thought he ran his typical Mo Donegal race there. But he does have to answer the question of can he close into into a race where there's very minimal speed here. I would be inclined to say that he's got a good ability to do that, because early voting in the Wood had a very similar setup to the setup I think We the People would get in the Belmont. But are you worried that he could potentially be closing into a leader that could potentially not come back to him, or is he going to adjust well to the setup of the Belmont?
So to answer the first question, I think it is going to be, a potential challenge for him to try and catch a horse who's going to be loose on the lead. But I think your point is well made regarding that he did overcome that scenario in the Wood Memorial, because when Morello broke so poorly, early voting was loose on the lead, and Mo Donegal had to come and run him down that day, and he did it. This is a little bit of a different race. They're going to go at a slower pace, but I do think Mo Donegal will like the mile and a half. I'm not as. It's funny. His race to me has been in the Derby has been viewed a lot of different ways, and you referenced him being wide, and he was at the top of the stretch, but he really wasn't for most of the race. He saved ground for around the first turn certainly, and for most of the far turn, and then he got fanned extremely wide coming off the bend. But I thought he may have gotten shuffled back a little bit early, but I thought overall he actually had a pretty good trip in that race when you factor in the race shape and the pace, which really set up well for late runners like him and obviously Rich Strike. So he's a hard horse for me to get a real confident line on, because there's certainly aspects of his race in the Derby and his overall form that are encouraging, but there's some other things about it that I think are not as encouraging as you might think at first glance, and the Derby being one of them. I'm of a mind that he ran well in the Derby, but that he got, all things considered, a pretty good trip that day when you factor in the totality of the way the race was run.
So now we'll move on to the winner of the Kentucky Derby, and we'll spend a few minutes on him. But I guess just to start off, do you think, or how much do you think the pace meltdown in the Derby played into Rich Strike being able to win it?
98%. I mean, it was, but look, there were several horses who had that kind of pace that should have benefited them. Mo Donegal and Barber Road among them. And Rich Strike outran those horses. So it certainly, in my mind, contributed mightily to his victory, but he still had to do it. And he did it better than Mo Donegal and Barber Road on the day, for sure. So I do think it was significant, though, the pace for him. But he still had to go out there and run faster than Mo Donegal and Barber Road and everybody else, and he did.
And I think, at least personally, that's the thing that's really difficult to read about Rich Strike, because he definitely needed everything to fall apart in front of him to be able to win the race, but he still had to be good enough to run by all the horses, and he was on Derby Day. Are you taking the mindset of him that he absolutely needs a kind of pace like that to win a major race, or can he adjust to the circumstances of a race like this and be able to win it?
I'm more in the former camp, that he needs that kind of a pace. But look, he hasn't had that many chances on dirt in his career. So I don't know yet. But that's the position I'm taking now, and I may have to reevaluate after the Belmont's run. But at this stage of his career, that's the theory for me that I'm working on, that he needs a radioactive pace to close into, and absent that, he's not going to run as well. We'll see if that turns out to be a theory that will be based in fact going forward, or if it's a theory that will need to be rewritten.
And now we'll get into the second of the two horses that Todd Pletcher has running the race, the very intriguing filly Nest. I thought that she ran a very good race underneath in the Kentucky Oaks, but she did run second to Secret Oath, and Secret Oath was, I thought that she had a rather excuses-free trip in the Preakness. She did get pinched back a little bit in the very early running of the race, but I thought she ran very similar to her Arkansas Derby run. The first thing I'll say with Nest to you is it concerning to you that the horse that finished in front of her in the Kentucky Oaks was convincingly beaten by two of the better colts in the crop in Epicenter and early voting in the Preakness?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I thought Secret Oath ran a terrific race in the Preakness. The Arkansas Derby was a brutal trip for her. She was pinched back. She ran extremely wide on the far turn and kind of lost her punch late, but understandably considering the way the race unfolded. And I thought it was a similar situation in the Preakness. And also, don't forget, the pace didn't end up being all that quick there when Epicenter didn't go out and either go for the lead or at least challenge early voting. It ended up being well back early. In fact, he and Secret Oath were the last two under the line the first time by. So I thought Secret Oath actually ran a good race, considering where she was early, the wide move she had to make on the far turn. And don't forget, the top two in that race are terrific horses, both early voting and Epicenter. I think you could make a reasonable argument that they might even be better than anything that's in the Belmont on Saturday. So in the context of all that, no, it doesn't concern me that Nest lost to Secret Oath and then Secret Oath came back and got beat in the Preakness, because I thought her effort in the Preakness was very good against very good horses.
And well, further the point on Nest, I feel that, at least in my personal opinion, I feel that she's one of, if not the best bred in this race to get the distance. And in preparing for this race, I did a look back on the fillies that have run in the Belmont Stakes in modern times, and the formula that I saw was that the fillies that got the distance in the Belmont tended to run well. And do you think she'll get the distance of the mile and a half, and on that same level, if she gets it, do you think she'll run at least a in the money finish or something like that? If not, could she win the race?
She's definitely bred for the distance. I think your point that you made a little bit ago is accurate. Of all the horses in the race, I think she's the best bred for it. The question is going to be, is she good enough? And that I'm not sure about. But I think she belongs in the race with that kind of pedigree, with Todd Pletcher, who's a 3-time Belmont winner, and one of those wins was with a filly, Rags to Riches. He knows what it takes for a filly to have success in this race. And so I respect her. She's not my top pick in the race, but I think it's an appropriate spot for her. I think her connections are doing the right thing. I mean, really, their only other option, if they wanted to run Saturday, was to cut her back to a mile, a one-turn mile, and run against Echo Zulu in the Acorn. Well, I would make the argument, and I think most sane people would as well, that the Belmont is a smarter spot if those are your two options. And otherwise you're just sitting on her until the Mother Goose several weeks from now. So it's the right spot for her based on a number of factors, pedigree, as you pointed out, included. I just don't know if she's good enough, just as I don't know if Secret Oath would be good enough against this group of horses.
And that's the real issue with her. I will add one thing, and I've said this several times, but in my opinion, there's nobody better in the business than Todd Pletcher at turning or at getting them to the Belmont from that 5 weeks Derby, or in this case Oaks, into the Belmont. Obviously, that has been the route that all of his Belmont winners have come from, and plenty of his good runners up in the board hitters in past Belmonts have come through. We'll get to the most intriguing horse, I think, for me in the race is Creative Minister. He ran a very, very good race in the Preakness last time out. It was his first start against graded stakes level horses, and his 2 wins before that in the maiden and the allowance race, they had been strong efforts. And in his maiden, or his first career effort, he definitely needed more ground there. I'm not sure. I'm questioning if a mile and a half is exactly what he wants to do. I haven't quite gotten the time to figure out exactly whether that's something that he wants to do, but his run in the Preakness indicates that he does have some class. How do you like him going into this race?
Yeah, I like him. I think he's got a very good chance to win the race. I thought, like you did, his Preakness was a terrific effort. He's very lightly raced, and he's gone forward with his buyer speed figures from every start to the next start. So he still hasn't reached the peak of his performances that we know of. Now, maybe the Preakness was it, and he's going to regress in the Belmont. But until that happens, you don't really know what his ceiling is. So I think he's got a good chance on Saturday. He's come a long way in a short amount of time, but I thought he ran a very credible race in the Preakness behind 2 extremely talented horses in early voting and Epicenter, and I could see him being very much a win candidate on Saturday.
Just a few horses left to get to now. We'll talk about Barber Road next. I've never been the biggest fan of him. I kind of feel like he's one of those closers that is always getting there late, but never quite gets there too late. Do you think he could be that kind of horse that is the closer that is always coming, but that run is coming too late? Or do you think he's a board hitter or potentially even a winner in this race?
Yeah, I'm more in the former camp of those scenarios. He just seems to nibble at the minor placings. And, generally speaking, the horses that ran in the stakes races at Oaklawn this winter haven't done as well in the Triple Crown races, like Cyberknife, for instance, being the primary example. And that's who Barber Road chased home in the Arkansas Derby. So I think he needs to step up. He's a neat horse in that he fires every time. He always seems to bring home a check. I just don't know that he's quite gotten to the level that he needs to get to have success against these kinds of horses. But he's a thoroughly admirable horse because he runs a lot and he fires a good effort every time.
A couple of long shots that we have left. The first one that I'll get to is Skippy Longstocking. I thought he could have potentially been a board hitter in the Preakness. Unfortunately for him, the pace did not set up for him there. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case either in the Belmont. Does he have any chance to hit the board in this race?
I'm just not a big fan of this horse, Jack. He just is kind of a one-paced plotter. I don't think he'll have any problem getting the distance of the Belmont. He's just not fast enough. He's just not ever run a race that would make you go, boy, he's really starting to come into his own and he's going to step up here. He just kind of runs the same one-paced race, whether it's the Preakness or the Wood Memorial. He just kind of goes around there and picks up a minor placing and seems content with that. I just don't know that he's at the level that you need to be to have success in the Belmont Stakes.
And with that being mentioned, I'll ask you right now, as of this point, who do you think is in the best place to win the Belmont? I won't necessarily ask you for your pick unless you would like to give us your pick for this race, but who do you feel is in the best position right now to win the Belmont?
I really think We the People is, just from a pure pace handicapping standpoint. I mean, whether it's the first race on Thursday at Penn National or the Belmont Stakes, one of the key factors for any handicapper when looking at a race is how's this race going to shape up? What's the pace going to be? Is it going to be a contested pace? Is it going to be a slow pace? Is it going to be a number of horses going for the lead or one horse? And any race that any handicapper looks at and tries to envision how it's going to unfold, that's part of the process. And when you do that for the Belmont Stakes, We the People has a decided edge based on the lineup for this race because his 7 rivals don't naturally have the kind of speed that can keep up with him. And like we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, some of them, or if not all of them, are going to have to get out of their comfort zone to have any chance of beating him. If We the People fires, look, if We the People can't stay the trip, then it's a jump ball. But going into the race on paper, I think, to answer your question, has the edge and is the most likely win candidate just because the race comes up so good for him.
And with that being mentioned, we'll just have to see how everything ends up playing out. But we appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us for a little bit about the Belmont, Jay.
Anytime. Thanks, Jack.